Juror number 50, Scotty David. You may remember him from the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. Of course, he filled out that questionnaire, marked a no when he probably should have marked a yes. He testified today in the Southern District of New York in front of Judge Allison Nathan. Big question is Ghislaine Maxwell going to get a new trial? You may remember Scotty David. This is what he said after the trial, after the verdict came in, and Ghislaine Maxwell was found guilty on the important counts. He went and gave an interview with the Daily Mail. Listen, this is what he said.
To really reach that level of understanding with each other and then make true progress with the deliberations, would that be
correct?
A fair assessment?
Yes.
It's quiet.
So you decided to share your story.
You decided to share your story.
That you'd tick yes to in the questionnaire. It was something that people were aware of when you were selected as a juror.
No, they don't ask your sexual abuse history. They didn't ask it in the questionnaire.
I thought in the questionnaire there was a question that asked if you were a victim or if you were a friend or a relative of a victim.
Looking at it.
It was number 48.
Question 48. Was it in there?
Remember.
Somebody sent me the questionnaire today and there was a question.
Interesting.
Interesting.
I mean,
Yes.
I guess, when did you fill in that questionnaire?
I definitely, on the first day of jury selection, I would have definitely marked yes, but I honestly don't remember that question.
Poor guy.
You're not in the stand right now, too.
No. I mean, I know my face is red because I can feel the
Yes.
blood, but I honestly, that's why I answered it that way. I don't remember it being there, but I did answer, I definitely remember a family or relative or something, but being sexually abused. I was honest on all my questions.
Of course you were. Of course you were, but he just got it wrong. And you can see a little bit of the panic in his face as he's recognizing he may be in a big world of hurt. He, of course, could be facing criminal charges. And so he may have been somebody who was going to be invoking his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. But just last night, before he was scheduled to go testify, the Department of Justice came out and they granted him immunity. You can see Adam Klasfeld over from Law and Crime says that the DOJ is officially authorizing immunity to juror number 50. Says he's going to testify on Tuesday about the discrepancies between what he told reporters about being a sexual abuse survivor and what he wrote on his jury questionnaire. He otherwise, of course, would have done the right thing and invoked the Fifth Amendment. I'm not going to answer any questions, but because the Department of Justice, which of course is the same agency that is prosecuting Ghislaine Maxwell, because they came out and said, you're now immune, he came in and testified. Here is what that looks like. You can see this is a letter. Attention, Laura Pomerantz. We know that she's one of the prosecutors who was in the case against Ghislaine Maxwell. This is regarding witness immunity authorization. In the Ghislaine Maxwell case, says, Dear Mr. Williams, pursuant to the authority vested in me by all of these laws, I am now approving your request requiring so-and-so to give testimony to provide information in another matter, provided, of course, that they would be invoking their privilege. This is basically a non-prosecution order saying that if this person is going to invoke, we will allow them to testify and we're not going to hold anything that they use against them in future prosecutions. And so now that that roadblock is out of the way, we're going to see juror number 50 coming into court because we've got to clear this issue up. Big question. Did he improperly bias the jury by refusing to disclose that he has a past that involves some of these same issues that we heard about in the Ghislaine Maxwell case? And it apparently is true that he talked about these issues while they were in the jury deliberation room. And so now he's got immunity. He's coming into court to testify. We spent a lot of time with Inner City Press covering the Ghislaine Maxwell case. We're going to go back to them and Adam Klasfeld for some background on this. Inner City Press down at the Southern District of New York. He gives us a breakdown, says that Scotty David is set to sit in the jury box. This is the juror back in where he came from, with a long boom mic stretching towards him. So big microphone coming in. Boothie is not in the box as of 10:10. Even if Judge Nathan grants U.S. attorney immunity, it would only kick in. And so, of course, it did. At 10:21, Scotty David, which is the juror, and Todd Spodek roll into the jury box. Scotty's in a sweater with a nice stripe across it. Spodek is in a suit. He's the lawyer, and he's definitely different than the actor who played him in Investing Anna. Don't know what that's about. But here we see Adam Klasfeld is going to be detailing who else is in the room. We know that Scotty Davis enters. That's what he looks like. I found a picture of Todd Spodek. This is the lawyer representing juror number 50. We've got Judge Nathan. Before she takes the courtroom, bailiff Stan says, "All rise." Judge Nathan then, of course, enters the courtroom. We've got U.S. Attorney, one of the prosecutors, one of four, prosecuting Ghislaine Maxwell. This is Allison Moe. She enters the courtroom. And then we've got Bobby Sternheim, defense lawyer extraordinaire for Ghislaine Maxwell, who was there. And so let's take a look at how these proceedings unfolded. Adam Klasfeld says, Judge Nathan says, I received proposed questions from both sides from you here today. I've carefully considered all of these questions. The juror who's here today would prefer to be called juror number 50, not Scotty David, even though that's the name he went by in the interviews. And so Judge Nathan says, yeah, no problem. We'll call you juror 50 if you want to. Inner City Press tells us the line of questioning starts with U.S. prosecutor Miss Moe. Remember her? She was one of the prosecutors prosecuting Ghislaine. Miss Moe Comey, Maureen Comey, is James Comey's daughter, of course. Judge Nathan says, Mr. Spodek, on behalf of juror 50, talking to the defense lawyer about the juror, says, we're here today on a defendant's motion for a new trial. Ghislaine Maxwell and her team filed a motion for a new trial. Says, I have received proposed questions for both sides. The defense wants to do its own questioning, but I deny that application. Okay, so Miss Maxwell and her defense lawyers are not going to be able to come in here and beat up juror number 50. I'm going to be doing the questioning, the judge is saying. Judge Nathan says, does he be referred to as juror 50? He said he does. All right. So is he invoking the Fifth Amendment? Yes, he is, Judge. Okay, very good. Yes, Your Honor, he is invoking it. And therefore, in record, I've signed the proposed immunity order. Right? All of this is very formulaic. It's use immunity. You need to answer my questions truthfully today. Now that you have this immunity, we can't, nothing that you say is going to be used against you. You will not be prosecuted, even if you've committed a crime, says Judge Nathan. You understand me, juror number 50? He says, yes, I do. So we've got there, Spodek is there. We also can see here, as a result of the immunity agreement, Adam Klasfeld tells us that David cannot be prosecuted. Juror 50 goes to the witness box, steps down, provides his full name privately to the court reporter. He's now under oath, swears in. David has the binder in front of him. Judge Nathan refers him back to court exhibit number 1, his jury questionnaire. We're going to go through that in a minute. Inner City Press gives us some more detail here, says that Scotty David, of course, gets inserted right into that plastic witness box. Everybody's pretty much used to the COVID bubbles at this moment in time. Judge Nathan says, I'll not ask you about jury deliberations or your thought process. There's a binder in front of you, juror 50. Court exhibit 1 is an exact copy of the questionnaire you filled out back on November 4th, 2021. He picks it up and says, very interesting. Nathan says, do you recognize that? He says, yes, Your Honor. Laying foundation. Says, look at 48. It's a question about assault. You indicated no. We've got a copy of this from Klasfeld. Is that accurate? Juror 50 says, no, it's not accurate. Judge Nathan says, well, what is an accurate answer? Can you tell us what that is there? Juror 50. And he says, yes. The correct answer would have been yes. For self. In other words, for me. And juror 50 says, well, I was abused as a child. Judge Nathan says, what happened? It was a family member who's no longer a part of the family and one of their friends when I was 9 and 10 years old. Inner City continues on. We can see this is Scotty David. This is the copy of the press. This is the jury questionnaire from Adam Klasfeld. It says he's asked about question 48. And you can see his answer is no. And so we've seen a lot of stories about this. This is an actual copy of what this looks like. If we zoom in a little bit, we see question 47 was witness in this case may testify claiming abuse or assault. Would you have any difficulty assessing the credibility of a witness claiming assault or abuse just like you would any other witness? Okay, so somebody comes in and says, I've been abused. This question is saying, would you be sympathetic to them? Would you feel like you would give them an extra benefit of the doubt, because they came in and said, I got, hurt and harmed by this person? Would you weigh their credibility? Would you give them more than somebody else? Yes or no? He says no. Okay. Well, that's interesting. He says no. 47A didn't answer yes, so don't need to answer that box. 48 then is the big question, the one causing all the problems. Here this says, have you or a friend or family member ever been the victim of harassment, abuse, or assault? Big questions there. This includes actual or attempted assault or any other unwanted advance, including by a stranger, acquaintance, supervisor, teacher, or family member. Yes for self, yes for friend or family member, meaning yes, I've been the recipient of that, or yes, a friend or family member has been the recipient of that, or no. He writes, no. All right, so obviously that is inaccurate, not true. And so we continue on. Inner City Press reports for us, says, how often did this happen? Once, twice, multiple occasions? He says multiple occasions. Judge Nathan, did you tell anyone? No, I didn't. Not until I was in high school. My mom then called the police, but I don't know if anything was filed. There were no charges brought. Juror 50 continues on, says it was a stepbrother. Says, all right, okay, well, thank you for the background. Look at question 48B. Let me ask you this. Would it impact your ability to be fair? What is an accurate answer? So question 48 says yes or no. If yes, question 48A, question 48B. Would this be something that could impact your ability to be fair and impartial? He says no. Juror 50 writes, it did not impact my ability to be fair and impartial at all. Didn't change anything. Judge Nathan says, okay, well, question 25, let's go back to that one. Victim of a crime. Was your no accurate? He says, well, now that I think about it, not accurate. I was thinking about like a mugging or something like that. I no longer associate with my abuse with being a victim. I don't know anyone who's ever been robbed, right? So it sort of says, well, I've been healed from this thing, and so have I ever been the victim of a crime? He was thinking, I've never been robbed or had anything stolen from me, so no. Now that I think about it, though, yes, back then I was the victim of a crime. However, I've recovered from that, and so I no longer identify with that situation as a victim. So now he's sort of going through. And the judge is, well, hello, this is a pretty important questionnaire. What happened here? This continues on. We see here that we've got Judge Nathan is going over to question 49 now and says, you or any family member ever been accused of some sort of harassment like this? He says, no. Is that accurate? Yeah, that's accurate. But you accused your stepbrother. So you just accused somebody else who is a family member. And he said, well, I don't consider him a family member. Oh, well, he's sort of a stepbrother by law. I mean, he's married, right? The daughter of one of your parents' significant others. I flew through the questionnaire, he says. Well, you don't say. Juror 50 says, I never thought I'd get selected for this jury. That's why I just rushed through this. I had to get here early and wait a long time to get into the courthouse, and I was super distracted. Anyways, I was sat 4 feet away from the table where people dropped their questionnaires. He said, I just went through it, checked, okay. Judge Nathan says, okay, well, now you acknowledge that a stepbrother is a relative, right? Yeah. By law, he was a family member. I mean, I see that now. Says, did you hope to be on this jury? Like, were you trying to get on here? And Juror 50 says, well, if you're going to serve jury duty, it might as well be interesting. It's Ghislaine Maxwell. It's Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, I wasn't trying to get on there, but I wasn't mad that I got put on there. Let me just leave it at that. So we see this continues on. We've got Judge Nathan says, you acknowledge it was inaccurate, right? This whole thing. So why did you do it? He says, well, I didn't see the word self. They had audio and visual problems and didn't have a phone or a book. I was thinking about a breakup from a couple weeks ago. I thought it was asking about a family member or friend. The box says yes for self. I just missed it. He says, look, can we stop beating me up over this? All right. This was one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in my life. I do feel bad for this guy. He says, did you see the other questions with self box? Juror 50 says, only now. I see it. When did you find out about this problem? He says, well, in an article about my interview with the Daily Mail. So he doesn't even recognize. It sounds like what's happening here is he doesn't even recognize this as a problem until he reads about his interview in the Daily Mail where they say this is a problem. So the reporter's sitting there with him, and as he's revealing what's happening, she recognizes this is the story of a century. Ghislaine Maxwell is going to get a new trial. And this poor guy's like, well, I didn't even realize it at the time, but when she said it in her headline the next day, I read about it and realized this is not good. Judge Nathan says, was it intentional? He says, absolutely not. Were you thinking you'd personally benefit from being on this jury? And he says, no, gosh, no, I mean, not at all. Intercetti continues, says, I'm the person I am due today, due to my goals and ambitions, but I should have marked yes for self. When did you learn what case it was? Well, after about 3 hours of being here. And how long did it take you to fill this out? He says, great question. I don't know. Judge Nathan writes or asks him, well, why did you rush through it? He says, it's like in school. You want to finish and hang out with your friends. It's a good thing. I hate these stupid forms, like at the doctor's office. No, everything's fine. Judge Nathan says, were you concerned with following my instructions? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely I was. I just didn't think I'd be chosen. And your questionnaire, Judge Nathan asks, it seems to follow the instructions throughout. I mean, you were kind of pretty diligent about a lot of this. How do you reconcile that with your testimony? Saying, you sounded like you just said you rushed through this, but as we go through the other documents, other questions, that's accurate, that's accurate, that's accurate. And it seems like you got all of those right. But these questions that might preclude you from being a juror on this case, you answered conveniently the opposite way that might put you on a panel. Well, that's pretty curious. And how do you rectify the two of those concepts? It says, well, where it says, if yes, I just flew through. Since I checked no. I was just in the zone. I really just wanted to, get out of there. And so I had no thought about ever making it. So I just flew through it. And she continues, we see here, this is Adam Klasfeld saying, well, this was backing up. Adam Klasfeld is giving us a little bit more detail about what happened. He says this happened on multiple occasions, didn't tell anybody. He says, I just flew through this questionnaire saying I never, ever thought that I was going to be put on here. And Judge Nathan says, you said my question was a good question about that time. If we go back to the timing on that, how long did it take you to fill this out? Good question. How long was it? Juror 50 says, well, I didn't see a clock, but it felt like hours before we ever saw your video, Judge. So maybe about an hour before to fill out the questionnaire. And Juror 50 says, yeah, I think that's about right. That might be about right. And Juror 50 says, I don't tell many people about this type of thing that happened to me. She says, well, that's, but you did in several interviews. I mean, right after this was over, right? You went out and started talking about it. And Juror 50 says, yeah, but this is going back to a deliberation thing. I only used it, my prior history of abuse, to talk to a reporter about jury deliberation. Like, that's the only reason it came up. I don't ordinarily just go out and volunteer it, but I just had to in this case. Judge Nathan says, you knew the public was interested in this case, right? Well, yeah, but I didn't know this would happen. I mean, if I had lied deliberately, he says, I wouldn't have told anyone about it. If I said I could remember things like the color of the wall, I would be clear about that. Says, Nathan writes, your friends, right? They were all following the news when all of this was going on in a case that you said you were on the jury on. He said, yeah, but most people didn't even know. I don't want to watch this type of stuff. I saw victims on the stand and I said, I can do that too. Nathan writes or asks, so on November 16th, I asked you directly if you'd answered the questions accurate and if you could be fair. Before the trial started, everybody here on the jury panel, can you do the job of being a juror in this case? It's going to be a long, grueling case. Can you be fair? Says, yep, I based myself solely on the evidence and I could be fair. So the judge calls people up. Judge Nathan says, I'm going to meet with counsel at the sidebar. Come on up. And so they come up to the judge's bench and they start having a conversation. We've got the witness box. Scotty David over here starts drinking some water. Judge Nathan comes back and says, listen, Judge Nathan asks him, I asked if you took my instructions carefully, and your answer is no? Juror says, I did not take your instructions carefully. Judge Nathan says, why? Well, I began to float. I began to fly. I don't know what happened. I have no idea what happened. Just lost total control of my mind. My oral questions, she says, not the ones on the questionnaire, but the things that I was asking out in court. Did you listen carefully? Says, yeah, I answered those questions carefully. Well, and why was it different? It was weeks later. I wasn't thinking about my ex. I was heartbroken, man. Judge Nathan says, well, what about my instructions at various points? It was to follow them. That was my goal, my intention. And all right, so that's great. But, after this was all over and you went out and had conversations with the media, this is a private thing, as you're telling us. Why did you go out and talk to the media about this? Why did you think your family and friends wouldn't know when you did interviews? So I wasn't using my full name. And I'm not ashamed. It's common anyways. And so I have no problem speaking out about this. I saw them out there. They're being brave. I can do the same thing. Juror 50 says, and when my friends commented on my post and texted me about it, they didn't even know this trial was happening. So when I posted some of this stuff on social media, it was all sort of, people didn't connect it with the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. So I didn't think it would be in the news. I wasn't planning to hide. If I was asked if I was abused, I would have said yes. But you did get asked and you didn't say yes. Klasfeld says, I didn't think this would happen. I didn't lie to get on this jury. And if I did lie, obviously, I wouldn't have told anybody about it. It was an honest mistake. And he is just sort of pouring out there. Pressed on the incongruity, he said, I felt like if they were brave enough, then so could I. That's why I stood up and spoke out. That's why I went out and started communicating with the media. It goes on. He filled the forms out. He says, I skimmed way too fast. I was distracted by the noise. I thought I was asking about family or a friend, not me personally. Says that it was an inadvertent mistake. Says this is one of the biggest mistakes I have made in my life. And I certainly think that it is up there on mistakes. Klasfeld says that David responds about whether he intentionally tried to get on there. He says, absolutely not. Absolutely not, Your Honor. Absolutely not. I was not trying to do this with bad intentions. He says, I don't think of myself as a victim. That's a terrible excuse, but I just don't think that I was going to be chosen. And I just don't think about this regularly anyways. And so at this point, I was just super distracted. Why didn't you think you'd get selected? He said, well, there's just a large number of candidates. I didn't set out to get onto this jury. And so it's just kind of strange that I did. Judge Nathan asks him about social media. Says, you posted on social media. He says, yeah, after the trial. That's right. Says, you thanked Annie Farmer, didn't you? Annie Farmer, somebody who testified in the trial. Says, for forwarding the articles. I have 2 followers. I just randomly saw it. So, it's nothing really big. Judge Nathan says, what about this Instagram account you have called This Bear Travels? Says, I thought this trial might be interesting, and keep my attention. And how did you feel? Judge Nathan asked. I was like, did I just mess something up? Did you speak about the consequences with any of the reporters? No. All right. Judge Nathan says, I need another word with counsel. So counsel goes back up there. They have oppositional questions. They're talking about whether the line of questioning was distracting him or whatever this was. We can see Scotty David is here. Inner City Press is going to help us wrap this up. It says, you heard my summary of the case, right? Judge Nathan says. To Juror 50 says, yeah, I did. I listened to it. Judge Nathan, counsel. We've got U.S. Attorney says, let me find a date. So we got a briefing by Friday. Maxwell's counsel says, I'm starting a trial, so I need 2 weeks. Nope. 1 week. Judge Nathan says 1 week. So the defense attorney, Maxwell's counsel, says we need some additional time, 2 weeks. Nathan says, nope, 1 week. You get 15 pages. Submit your questions. Have Juror 50's identifying information redacted. The rest, docket it, and we'll handle it. The briefing then submit it by we're adjourned. Same thing Klasfeld says. They set a date on March 15th, 1 week from today. Briefings from both parties to talk about the ramifications of David's testimony. And we'll see what the parties come up with. So Ghislaine Maxwell's defense team will say, well, Judge, you heard from Klasfeld. Klasfeld is on Twitter. We are hearing from Klasfeld. Klasfeld is reporting about what Scotty David testified to in court, saying that Scotty David, the defense is going to say Scotty David made a material problem in this case. I mean, they really biased and prejudiced the jury in a way that is catastrophic, that is material, and therefore Ghislaine Maxwell needs a new trial because this is not appropriate. The prosecution's going to come back and say, you heard from him. I mean, it had nothing to do with it. So what? So what? It's a wrong question. It's kind of irrelevant. Nobody cares about that question anyways. It's not material. Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction should stand, and leave it at that. Now, we'll see what happens. I'm inclined to think that Ghislaine Maxwell is going to get a new trial. I think that having a person who was a victim of a very similar crime, who went out there and talked about sort of using that in the deliberations, although we didn't get into deliberation talk here, we do know that the juror went through a very important question. I'm a defense attorney. If I were Ghislaine Maxwell's defense attorneys, and I'm not, I would be doing cartwheels if an issue like this came up, as I'm sure they're doing back there in their multi-million-dollar mansions, wherever they're at. And so I want to hear from you. Let me know what you think about this. Let me know down in the comments below. You think Ghislaine Maxwell is going to get a new trial? Yes or no? Thanks to juror number 50. And be nice to juror 50. I think that I think he just kind of made a mistake, and he was trying to get out there and kind of be gung-ho and take a stand for something, and it kind of backfired, all because of that question 48. And Ghislaine Maxwell couldn't be happier. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with a friend or family member. I'd like to see you on the next one. Make sure you hit the subscribe button before you get out of here, and I'll see you there.